President, we are not seeing you. Your entire screen is white. We are seeing you now, sir. Good.
Thank you. And I assume you can hear me as well?
Hearing you loud and clear, sir.
Thank you very much. Would you mind opening the proceedings, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, Caribbean Court of Justice, Appellate Jurisdiction, on appeal from the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Saint Lucia, delivery of reserved judgment in CCJ Appeal LCCV number 1 of 2025 between the Bank of Nova Scotia and the Comptroller of Inland Revenue. The members of this afternoon's panel are Mr. Justice Anderson, President and Presiding Judge.
Good afternoon, Counsel.
Mr. Justice Barrow.
Good afternoon to all.
Mr. Justice Jamada.
Good afternoon.
And Madam Justice Ononu.
Good afternoon, everyone.
May we have the appearances, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honours. For the appellants, the appellant, the Bank of Nova Scotia, Barry Atz, myself, and Thomas Tibbles represent the appellant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honours. My name is George K. Shalmang, and with me is my learned friend, Mr. Seruja Snack, and we appear on behalf of the respondent.
Thank you very much. So we have a decision for you in this matter. I will read a summary. Please be reminded that the summary is not the authoritative text of the judgment and it should not be taken as such in any discussion of the judgment or the reasons for the judgment. The authoritative text of the judgment will be shortly uploaded to the court's website. This appeal arose from a dispute between the Bank of Nova Scotia, BNS, a Canadian financial institution operating in Saint Lucia through a branch, and the Comptroller of Inland Revenue of Saint Lucia. The disagreement concerned the legality of imposing withholding tax under the Income Tax Act of Saint Lucia in the sum of EC dollars 2,142,376.80 paid by the BNS branch in Saint Lucia to its head office in Canada. The central issues were, one, whether these payments made by BNS Saint Lucia to its Canadian head office and regional subsidiaries for support services constituted management charges subject to withholding tax under Section 76 and Schedule 3 of the Income Tax Act. And two, whether interest expenses incurred by BNS in its banking operations could be classified as cost of sales under Section 39(1)(b)(2) of the Income Tax Act, thereby limiting their deductibility. The Income Tax Appeal Commissioners upheld the Comptroller's assessment that the payments were management charges and that interest expenses were part of cost of sales. On appeal, the High Court affirmed the imposition of the withholding tax, but disagreed with the classification of interest expenses. Both parties appealed to the Court of Appeal, comprising Justices of Appeal Ventos, Ferrara, and Taylor Alexander, which dismissed BNS's appeal and partially allowed the Comptroller's cross-appeal, concluding that the payments were taxable management charges and that interest expenses did constitute cost of sales. BNS further appealed to this court, arguing that the payments made to the BNS head office were mere reimbursements, not income, and therefore fell outside the scope of the withholding tax regime. It also contended that the term cost of sales was inapplicable to banking operations and should not include interest expenses. The respondent controller maintained that the payments were for technical and management services and that interest expenses were a direct cost of providing banking services. This court was unanimous in rejecting the appeal. In an opinion authored by Anderson P., with Justices Baro, Jamadar, Onaniwu, and Ibo Osuji concurring, the court held that the payments fell squarely within the definition of management charges and were subject to withholding tax under Section 76(1)(b) of the Income Tax Act. Applying a purposive approach to statutory interpretation, it was emphasized that Parliament's intent was to tax cross-border remittances from branches to head offices, even if labeled as reimbursements. The court rejected the argument that such payments must constitute income in the narrow sense of profit or gain, affirming that the Income Tax Act contemplates a broader concept of income that includes payments for services rendered, regardless of markup. On the issue of territoriality, the court held that Section 7(5) of the Income Tax Act makes income accruing to a non-resident from any source other than employment or a permanent establishment subject to withholding tax. The provision contains no territorial limitation, so the services need not be performed in Saint Lucia. What matters is that the income accrues to a non-resident, which brings payment like those made by BNS Saint Lucia within the withholding tax regime. The court also upheld the Court of Appeal's correction of a drafting omission in Schedule 3, finding that the exclusion of the term branch was a clear legislative oversight that could be judicially remedied to give effect to Parliament's intent. On the second issue, Justice Ibu Osuji, with Anderson P. and Justices Baro, Jamadar, and Onaniwu concurring, held that interest expenses incurred by BNS in its banking operations were properly classified as cost of sales. The judge reasoned that the banking sector involves the sale of financial services and that interest paid on customer deposits is a direct cost of generating income. Drawing on accounting literature, industry practice, and comparative jurisprudence, Ibo Osuji J. emphasized that cost of sales is not limited to the sale of goods, but includes the cost of sale of services in modern commercial contexts. He rejected the appellant's reliance on outdated judicial dicta and affirmed that the term cost of sales must be interpreted in the light of contemporary business realities and the legislative purpose of Section 39 of the Income Tax Act. Accordingly, the appeal was dismissed and costs awarded to the respondent. That then is the summary of the court's decision. Is there anything from counsel?
Nothing from the appellant.
Nothing
Thank
from
you.
this
No,
one.
my lord. Grateful, obliged.
Thank you very much indeed. Madam Deputy Registrar, would you please close the proceedings?
Thank you, President Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Justice Barrow. Thank you, Mr. Justice Jamadar.
I think you went on mute,
Yes.
Madam Deputy Registrar.
I don't realize, sorry.
I think you just thanked
Thank
Justice
you.
Jamadar. Yes.
I'm going to start again. Thank you, President Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Justice Barrow. Thank you, Mr. Justice Jamala. Thank you, Madam Justice Onaniwu. Thank you, Counsel, and thank you to the staff of the Caribbean Court of Justice. This court now stands adjourned. Good day to all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.